The day I realized I was going about everything wrong, I was on the verge of giving up, surrounded by my creations that no one wanted. And everything changed because of an old man who sold simple wooden toys. This story, inspired by my own journey, might just change the way you see things forever. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal isn't just a technique, it's a transformation. We'll explore together how a simple question shattered all my certainties, how to turn an ordinary object into a legend, and most importantly, how to create such a strong connection that the act of buying becomes obvious, a logical next step, not just a goal in itself. Chapter 1: The Expert's Curse. It all started in my small workshop. The smell of leather, the sound of my tools. I was an artisan. I spent dozens of hours perfecting every detail of my leather notebooks. Saddle-stitched seams, premium quality paper, impeccable finishes. Technically, my products were flawless. I was proud of them. And when it was time to present them at small creators' markets, I led with this pride. I became a walking technical catalog. Look at this full-grain, vegetable-tanned leather. The stitching is done by hand, which guarantees unwavering durability. The paper is 120 GSM, ideal for fountain pens. I'd see people nodding their heads, impressed. They would touch the leather, feel the quality, say it's magnificent. What craftsmanship! Then they would leave. Without buying anything. Every departure felt like a stab to the heart. I didn't understand. The product was perfect, the price was fair. What was wrong? I saw other stands, sometimes with less well-finished products, attracting crowds. People were buying with smiles, as if they were leaving with a treasure. I, on the other hand, felt like I was begging for attention, justifying my price with logical arguments that resonated with no one. My passion was becoming my prison. I was an expert in my product, but completely ignorant when it came to the human soul. I had fallen into the trap I see everywhere today, believing that a product's features alone are enough to convince. It's the greatest illusion of the creator. And I was on the verge of giving up entirely. Chapter 2: The Question That Changes Everything. It happened during a particularly dismal market. 0 sales in 6 hours. I was packing away my dashed hopes when an old man approached. He was my booth neighbor. He sold simple, carved wooden animals. And he hadn't stopped selling all day. He picked up one of my notebooks in his gnarled hands. I prepared to recite my usual technical specifications, but he stopped me with a gesture. He looked at the notebook, then he looked me straight in the eyes and asked me the most unsettling question of my life: what's its story? I stammered. Its story? Well, it's made of leather from. He gently cut me off. No. Not its manufacturing. Its story. Why does this one have this color? Who did you envision for it to become when you created it? Who is it made for? Silence. For the first time, I had no answer. I had spent hundreds of hours on its form, and not a second on its soul. I confessed my failure, my frustration to him. He smiled and told me, people don't buy leather and paper. They buy what it allows them to become. They buy the novel they'll write in it, the journeys they'll recount in it, the secrets they'll entrust to it. You're not selling an object, you're selling the beginning of an adventure. Stop selling the book and start selling the first chapter. That phrase resonated within me like a clap of thunder. That was it. I was selling an empty container, while he was selling wooden dreams. But that was only the beginning of the lesson. Chapter 3: Bringing a Hero to Life. I went home that evening completely shaken. I looked at my notebooks, lined up on the shelf. They were no longer mere objects. They were characters awaiting a destiny. I understood the first rule of applied storytelling: every product, every service, every idea must have a hero. And that hero isn't you, the creator. It's not even the product itself. The hero is the future user. So I began to reimagine each notebook. The dark, sturdy leather one? It was no longer Model A7. It was the explorer's companion. I imagined it in an archaeologist's bag in Egypt, or with a journalist covering a story at the ends of the earth. Its sturdiness was no longer a technical feature, it was the promise that it would protect precious memories against the trials of time and travel. The small, soft, light leather notebook? That was the poet's confidant. I imagined it on the bedside table of someone who wakes up at night with an idea, a rhyme, an emotion to capture before it flew away. Its flexibility was no longer a detail, it was an invitation to intimacy, to confession. By doing this, I wasn't changing anything about the product. I was changing everything about its perception. I was no longer describing an object, I was presenting an ally, a partner for a quest. And that quest is the one the customer wants to experience. And that's when everything shifted for the second time. Chapter 4: The Invisible Conflict. Every good story needs a conflict, an obstacle to overcome. I realized that my hero stories weren't enough. The explorer, the poet, what were they fighting against? I understood that the product had to be the solution to a problem, not just a beautiful object, but a deep, emotional problem. The explorer's true enemy isn't the jungle, it's oblivion. The fear that their discoveries, their emotions, will be lost forever. The notebook, then, isn't just a notebook, it's a memory anchor, a machine to conquer time. The poet's conflict isn't a lack of paper, it's the blank page, the fear that fleeting inspiration might never be captured. The notebook then becomes the butterfly net for ideas, the tool that transforms an ephemeral thought into an eternal work. By identifying this invisible conflict, I was no longer selling a product, I was selling a victory. Victory over the fear of forgetting, victory over the blank page, victory over routine. When you talk to someone, don't describe your solution. First, describe their problem, their conflict, with words that resonate deep within them. Show them you understand their struggle. Then, and only then, your product will no longer be an expense, but a liberation. The craziest part is what came next. Chapter 5: The 5 Senses of Story. My stories were taking shape, but they remained in my head. They were still too abstract. The old man hadn't just talked to me about story, he had appealed to my senses by letting me touch his wood, by telling me about the smell of the forest it came from. I understood that a story that isn't experienced isn't a story, it's a summary. People needed to be able to touch it, smell it, hear it. So I stopped saying, it's quality leather. I started saying, close your eyes. Smell this scent. It's a mix of earth and beeswax. It's the smell of old libraries and horse saddles. It's a scent that already tells a story of adventure even before you've written a single word. Instead of saying, the paper is thick, I'd say, listen. And I'd run my fingernail over the page. Do you hear that deep sound, that soft rustle? That's the sound of your ideas gaining weight, anchoring themselves in something real. I spoke of the feel of the leather that would develop a patina over time, becoming a unique testament to its owner's life. I made sure people weren't just looking at an object, but living an experience. I was no longer selling them a notebook, I was offering them a Proustian Madeline. By involving the senses, you bypass the logical brain and speak directly to the emotional brain. That's where decisions are made. That's where the magic happens. Chapter 6: The Promise of Transformation. This is perhaps the most important point of all. I realized that no one buys a product. Ever. We always buy a better version of ourselves. The person who buys the explorer's notebook isn't buying leather. They're buying the adventurer they aspire to be. They're giving themselves permission to dream, to travel, to be braver. The person who buys the poet's notebook doesn't just want to write. They want to feel like a poet. They want to see themselves as creative, sensitive, profound. My role was no longer to sell objects, but to sell transformations. My story shouldn't be about the product, it should be about what the customer would become because of it. The subliminal message was, with this object, you won't be quite the same. You'll take one more step towards the person you want to be. This is a radical shift in perspective. We no longer say, my product has this function. We say, with my product, you will become. That's the most powerful promise there is. It's why people buy branded sportswear not for the fabric technology, but to feel like an athlete. It's why we buy a certain type of coffee not for the beans, but for the morning ritual that makes us feel sophisticated and in control of our day. Sell the destination, not the train ticket. Chapter 7, Full Circle. Armed with this new philosophy, I returned to a market a few months later. My stand had changed. No more lists of features. Instead, next to each notebook model, there was a small card with 1 or 2 sentences. For the explorer, for those whose stories don't fit into a phone. To keep a record of desert sands and monsoon rains. For the confidant, midnight thoughts are too precious to be typed on a keyboard. Offer them a refuge of silence. And when people approached, I no longer spoke. I waited. They would read, then look at me. And I would ask them a single question: what adventure are you preparing for, or what dreams do you want to protect? The conversation changed radically. People no longer talked to me about price, they talked to me about themselves. About their projects, their passions. A woman bought a notebook from me to write her grandmother's story. A young man was setting off to travel the world and wanted a logbook that could take a beating. I wasn't selling anything anymore. I was creating connections. The sale was merely the logical conclusion of a human conversation. The notebook became a totem, a symbol of their commitment to their own story. And I was no longer a salesman, I was a storyteller. The old man was right. I had stopped selling books, and I was selling the first chapter. And that chapter was theirs. In conclusion, selling without selling isn't manipulation. It's the opposite. It's stopping seeing people as wallets and starting to see them as heroes of their own epic. Your role is to show them how your creation can be their magic sword, their treasure map. So forget arguments, technical specifications, pressure. Dig deeper. What is the deeper story of what you're offering? What invisible conflict does it resolve? What transformation does it enable? Tell that story from your gut, appealing to all 5 senses, with sincerity. Make sure people aren't buying a product, but investing in a story in which they play the starring role. That's the secret. That's the power of storytelling. And it changes absolutely everything. Share this with someone who's looking to get started. Don't forget to subscribe.